Hello, my name is James, I'm the mayor of JamessTown, and today we've got a brand new title to pick up for free from the Epic Games Store. Sadly, the 2 weeks of free games is finally up. I can't really complain about still receiving free games after the Christmas holidays. As of the 7th of January 2021 until the 14th of January 2021, we have Crying Suns, a tactical roguelite title that forces you to be a bit more strategic with your gameplay in comparison to other roguelikes and/or lights. Developed by Alt Shift and published by Humble Bundle, the game was released on the 19th of September 2019. With the game being a tactical roguelite, it aims to fill a niche in the genre that we don't see a lot of when it comes to roguelite games. In terms of the actual gameplay, it's pretty easy to describe as a different take on the classic indie game FTL, although with an arguably easier approach to the overall game, at least in my opinion. There's around 3 different aspects to the game's main gameplay that you need to focus on, with the first being exploration. First of all, similarly to FTL, you have a resource called Neo-N, which is required to jump between star systems and planets. Each star system has a couple of planets and points of interest to jump to, each requiring a single neon to do it. You start off in a sector, which has several different star systems you need to jump through to get to the end of the sector. Depending on whether or not you explore, you run the risk of running out of resources and missing out on stronger equipment to survive combat. Secondly, when you do in fact come across a planetary body, you can run the risk to explore it. Whilst exploring, you can possibly lose commandos and specialists, but you have a great chance of finding scrap, new specialists, and all sorts of useful additions to the ship. Commandos are simply a resource used for certain actions, but a specialist is actively useful in combat due to them providing a passive bonus to a certain element of your ship during said combat. The last thing you want to do is lose a specialist on one of these expeditions. Now thirdly, we have the combat. The combat works in a grid-like fashion and is played in a real-time capacity because you can always pause the combat at any point to reposition your ships. Before the actual start of the combat, there are 3 different sectors you need to assign specialists, weapons, and ships to. The specialist will provide passives, the weapons can do a variety of different aspects depending on the ones installed, but ships are going to be your main bread and butter in terms of damage. Each ship can be manually moved to any position on the grid, either in a defensive or offensive position. When they come into contact with an enemy ship, they will engage, either until one blows up or moves out of range from one another. To win, you've got to send those ships at your opponent and destroy their main starship. This can be done with weapons if you so decide, but that all depends on your run, as not all weapons deal damage in a traditional sense. When playing the combat, it's really quite engaging and keeps you on your toes from start to finish. As a result of this, it kind of ends up playing like a tug of war scenario, where you keep going from defensive to offensive only to switch it back again. Part of that ends up being down to the rock, paper, scissors style that has you alternate between fighters, frigates, and drones. Each of them has something they're strong against and something they're weak against, meaning you routinely have to swap them around. Quite honestly, the combat system really took me by surprise with how much I enjoyed it. There's just something so addicting about the game's main gameplay loop, it's constantly changing, and considering that no run is ever the same, there really is a lot to enjoy with this one. Personally, FTL never really did it for me when it first came out, but Crying Suns absolutely does. Now that I will argue is quite impressive considering that strategy tactical games aren't typically my cup of tea. When it comes to the visuals, I'm pretty impressed with this one. I will make the argument that it's pixel art, so for those that are sick of the pixel art style for indie games at this point, you're probably not going to be overly thrilled with this one. On the flip side though, it's a really well detailed pixel art style for the entirety of the game and is arguably some of the best pixel art visuals and aesthetics that I've seen in quite some time. It works really well for the sci-fi setting, which is great for me because again, I'm not the biggest sci-fi fan of all time, but the game did a good job of converting me from that with just the aesthetics alone. Moving on to the story, this really surprised me for one reason and one reason only, and that's the fact the game actually has an intriguing and engaging story. Roguelike games do not typically have a good story due to the nature of the game being procedurally or randomly generated, meaning you can't tailor the story perfectly around the game like typical genres. The developers, however, managed to do an excellent job on this one, and I would argue that's down to the big mystery of the universe that you're in. Here's a quick excerpt of the story without too much on the spoiler side. You wake up from cryogenic freezing from some highly intelligent AI called an Omni. These Omni now effectively run the star systems that have been inhabited by the Empire, which is effectively a governing body for this sector of the universe. The Omni informs you that you're a clone of one of the greatest military admirals to ever live, and it needs your help to find out what's happened to the rest of the star system. Every 4 years, this robot is set to receive a message from the Empire to check in on them, but for several years, there's been no response. Assuming something is wrong, it wakes you up to have you captain a ship and its crew to find out what in the world is going on out in the galaxy. To keep from touching upon spoilers, I'm going to stop there, but that initial intro hooked me from the beginning, and with every piece of info the game drip-fed me from there, I simply wanted to learn more and more, pressing forward. The story did a great way to encourage me to keep moving forward and see where things go from there. Now, that is definitely something I can't say for many roguelites that I've come across when it comes to the story. Finally, we have the audio, and yet again, I was once more impressed by what the game has brought to the table. The sound effects themselves sound as if they wouldn't be out of place in a Ridley Scott movie, an accolade the sound designer should wear with high praise. That, along with the background music, is just another great aspect of the game. The music itself inspires a sense of spacefaring exploration, and even mystery at times due to just how well it's been done. A game's soundtrack has to impress me enough to stay on, otherwise I'll just put some YouTube on in the background, but Crying Suns managed to avoid exactly that. In conclusion, Crying Suns is an incredibly well done tactical roguelite that I'd argue is a must play for anyone that enjoys the genre. Hell, even those that don't should give it a go. Initially, I didn't think this would be my type of game, but it very quickly took me by surprise, and for good reason. It's incredibly difficult to find an aspect of the game that I didn't like, and is easily one of very few games I can see myself coming back to on a regular basis. The gameplay, music, visuals, and story are all so well done that it makes for an encapsulating experience right from the word go. As a result of this, I'm going to have to give the game a Traffic score of green. I honestly couldn't sing this game's praises more if I tried, so be sure to pick it up while it's still free for the week and have yourself a blast. I know I will be. That's it for today's video. Thanks for sticking around until the end, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. Next week, we'll be receiving Star Wars Battlefront 2 Celebration Edition. No idea what the Celebration Edition brings to the table, but I look forward to finding out. Be sure to keep an eye out for that one, and my review next week. Until then though, I've been James, the Mayor of Jamestown, and I'm off. Goodbye.